David sat huddled in the corner of his tent, his heart racing with fear and doubt. Outside, the armies of Israel were preparing for battle against the mighty Philistines, and at the front lines stood Goliath, the giant of Gath. David had heard the stories of Goliath's strength and ferocity, and he couldn't help but feel a sinking feeling in the pit of his stomach. How could he, a mere shepherd boy, possibly defeat such a formidable enemy? As David sat there, his mind was plagued with worries and doubts. He thought of his family, his friends, and his people, all of whom were depending on him to defeat the Philistines and bring peace to their land. But how could he face a giant when he only held a slingshot in his hand? Suddenly, a voice broke through David's thoughts. "David, my son, why do you worry so?" It was the voice of Samuel, the prophet who had anointed him to be the next king of Israel. "I am afraid, Samuel," David admitted, tears welling up in his eyes. "I am afraid of Goliath and what he can do. I am afraid of failing my people." Samuel placed a gentle hand on David's shoulder. "Fear and worry are natural reactions, my son. But remember, the Lord is with you. He will not leave you nor forsake you. Have faith in him and trust in his plan, for he has chosen you for a great purpose." David nodded, feeling a glimmer of hope in his heart. He wiped away his tears and took a deep breath. He knew that Samuel was right. He had to trust in the Lord and his plan. With renewed determination, David picked up his slingshot and stepped out of his tent. As he made his way towards the battlefield, David couldn't help but feel small and insignificant compared to the towering figure of Goliath. But he reminded himself that with God by his side, he was capable of great things. The armies of Israel stood in awe as David stepped forward, challenging Goliath to a one-on-one battle. But Goliath only laughed, his deep, booming voice echoing across the valley. "Am I a dog, that you come to me with sticks?" he taunted. David ignored the giant's insults and focused on his faith. He took a stone from his pouch and placed it in his slingshot, never once taking his eyes off of Goliath. And with all his might, he let the stone fly towards the giant's forehead. Time seemed to stand still as the stone found its mark, embedding itself deep in Goliath's skull. The giant stumbled and fell to the ground, and the entire battlefield erupted in cheers and cries of victory. But for David, the victory was bittersweet. As he stood over the fallen giant, he couldn't help but feel a sense of sadness. He had taken a life, no matter how evil it may have been. David knew that this was not what God wanted, but he also knew that sometimes sacrifices had to be made for the greater good. The Israelites celebrated their victory, and David was hailed as a hero. But as the years went by, he couldn't shake off the worries and doubts that plagued him. He had been so young and inexperienced when he faced Goliath, and the weight of his actions weighed heavily on his conscience. But as he grew in wisdom and faith, David learned to trust in God's plan and to let go of his worries and doubts. He became a great king, known for his bravery and righteousness, and he knew that it was all because of his unwavering faith in the Lord. Now let's relate 1 Samuel 17, 1:58 to the story above. In the land of the Israelites, there was a great battle brewing between their army and the Philistines. The Philistines had gathered on one side of the valley, while the Israelites were on the other. In the midst of this tense situation, a giant of a man named Goliath stepped forward. He was over 9 feet tall and wore a full suit of armor, carrying a spear that weighed 15 pounds. He loudly challenged the Israelites, asking for one man to come and fight him. The Israelites were filled with fear, and no one dared to accept the challenge. 1 Samuel 17, 12, 22. David's arrival tone of voice is excited. Among the Israelites was a young shepherd boy named David. He had been sent by his father to bring food to his older brothers who were in the army. When David arrived, he saw the giant Goliath and heard his challenge. Unlike the other Israelites, David was not afraid. He had faith in God and knew that with God's help, he could defeat Goliath. He went to King Saul and offered to fight the giant, even though he was just a young boy. King Saul was hesitant at first, but David's confidence and trust in God convinced him to give David a chance. 1 Samuel 17, 23, 30. David's faith tone of voice is determined. As David prepared for battle, Saul gave him his own armor to wear, but David found it too heavy and unfamiliar. Instead, he chose to go into battle with just his sling and 5 smooth stones. David's faith in God was strong, and he knew that he didn't need fancy armor or weapons to defeat Goliath. He trusted in God's strength and guidance. As he walked towards Goliath, he declared, "The Lord who delivered me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear will deliver me from the hand of this Philistine." 1 Samuel 17, 30, 1, 37. David's confidence tone of voice is confident. When Goliath saw that his opponent was just a young boy, he laughed and belittled David, but David remained confident, knowing that the battle was not his, but the Lord's. He declared to Goliath, "You come against me with sword and spear, but I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty, the God of the armies of Israel." David's strong faith and trust in God's power and protection gave him the courage to stand up to the giant. 1 Samuel 17, 38, 49. David's victory tone of voice is triumphant. The battle began and Goliath charged towards David, but David quickly took a stone from his bag, loaded it into his sling, and struck Goliath in the forehead. The giant fell to the ground, and David ran to him, took Goliath's own sword, and cut off his head. The Philistines were defeated, and the Israelites rejoiced. David's faith, courage, and trust in God had led him to this incredible victory. 1 Samuel 17, 50-58. David's recognition tone of voice is modest. After the battle, King Saul asked David who he was, and David told him that he was just a humble shepherd boy. Saul was amazed by David's bravery and faith and offered to make him a part of his army. David, however, chose to return to his humble life as a shepherd, knowing that it was God who had given him the strength and courage to defeat Goliath. Through David's story, we learn the importance of having faith and trust in God, even in the face of seemingly impossible challenges. With God on our side, we can overcome any obstacle and achieve great things. Thanks for watching. Please share with friends and family. Thanks.